Due to the sensitive nature of the information contained in this following interview, the interviewee has asked that his voice be disguised so that he remains anonymous.
I'll explain the situation, what's happened, and what I've done over the years, and how things have changed.
Yeah.
Going back about 2.5 years, and all the years before then, I first started using when I was about 18, I think.
Okay. How old are you now?
26.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so I got into it then, and I'd always done short courses, maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then come off, was always off for months and months and months on end.
So what was your theory to be off a lot more than on?
Back then, obviously, it was still new to me, and I was a little bit more nervous and apprehensive about doing things, too serious. Like the dosages I was using were tiny, and that sort of thing. So I just kept it and tried to be safe with it. And although I'd done a little bit of research when I first started, my knowledge still wasn't up together. My knowledge has only really come together over the last 5-6 years, maybe. Anyway, so things started progressing. I started doing longer cycles, but I always came off, always ran a PCT, cleared myself down. And then I did quite a long course for probably about 18 weeks, I guess, going into my first competition in 2007. Then came off, I was off again. And then also I competed again in 2009, and again I did long cycles that were sort of 16 weeks, that sort of thing.
Right.
Came off. Then I started learning about how the pros do get their results, because you try and think, well, how on earth do they get the results and keep it without coming off? And then I learned about blasting and cruising, which do you know about this?
No.
All right. Blasting and cruising, from what I've learned from a few of the professional bodybuilders, is basically you do, let's say, a heavy course for about 10 to 12 weeks, high dosages of whatever you want to take, and then you cruise on a very low amount of testosterone. So let's say 1 mil of test every 10 days.
Okay. Really low. That's really low. So what when you say high to begin with, I mean, what would that do?
High for me was around 750 milligrams. So 3 mil.
Yeah.
I never really pushed it beyond that.
No. And what was your takes? Ethanate, sustanon?
Usually it was sust.
Yeah.
Usually it was sust, and I would be running the basics, kind of like if I'm bulking, it would be things like Deca is in there.
Yeah.
And then as I started, if I was cutting up for show, then I'd be switching to things like Trenbolone and Stanozolol and those sort of things. Anyway, so the theory is you cruise for 6 to 8 weeks on, let's say, 1 mil of testinanthate, slow release test. And the idea being is that 1 mil will still give you, over that time, slightly higher levels of testosterone than you would produce naturally. But it basically means that you never crash. You never crash from coming off, having 0 test levels, and then trying to get them up again. And the theory is that when you run a very, very small amount of tests for this sort of period of time, it gives a lot of your receptor sites time to upregulate again. All right. So you never have to come off. You stay on. You never crash. And then you can go back on, blast again, and your receptor sites are responsive.
And what about taking stuff to get your own production going? They don't bother with that, or?
Well, yeah, things have changed over the years. Originally, people didn't. Now people are saying, now people have been they've run like a PCT during the cruising period.
When you say PCT, is that the same as HCG? Is it, I'm not familiar with that.
PCT stands for post-cycle therapy.
Okay, fine.
Which is HCG, clomid. Yeah. So PCT is the pretty standard word.
Okay. I've been out of the scene, man, for 5 years. It's all changed already.
It's a nice PCT to other new sort of roid heads, and they haven't got a freaking clue.
Okay. They probably don't bother at all.
No, I get it from people. You know, you get people come to me, they ask me for advice, say you want to do this, that, and the other, and they still haven't got a clue. I tell them to go away and sort of read up on what they're doing.
But
they just don't have a fucking clue.
I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? It's unbelievable. So they're Karen telling us about this crash, this pros, what the pros are doing these days. Then,
right? Yeah. Anyway, so they're saying that during the cruising period, you run a PCT, so you try and get your own HPTA. Do you know what that means?
No.
Hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis backfiring again. So to get everything firing.
I'm very familiar with natural production, how it all works. I'm not a massive fan of all the long words of what they are, but I can draw diagrams and tell you exactly how that works. Now you said hypothalamus pituitary axis, diffusing hormone, gonadotropin, all that stuff.
Yeah, hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, stimulates the pituitary to release luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, gets the bollocks firing.
That's it.
Cycle is complete.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Anyway, so that's what people are, you know, supposed to do. Things have now since changed, and people are saying that you do need to come off, but the theory is now that if you were running a PCT after a course is actually too late. You need to run it while you're on,
because of the time lag for it to become effective.
And because if you are on for a long time, and this is something I've learned since obviously the problems that I've had, if your hypothalamus and pituitary are not stimulated for a very long time, then they will seriously shut down and they will not recover. If you use things like clomid almost constantly at like 50 milligrams a day alongside a cycle, your hypothalamus should, in theory, constantly be stimulated. So it never has time to shut down. So that when you come off, it should automatically
keep going,
carry on its production and that sort of thing. And it's not like it's had 10 to 12 weeks off and all of a sudden you're trying to jumpstart it, because it's been started constantly throughout the cycle. That's the theory of it now. So people now say that while you're on cycle, a better way of doing it is running something like 250 IUs of HCG twice a week. So a really small amount just to keep your bollocks still sensitive. And then running like clomid, running cycles of clomid, let's say a 30-day cycle of it, just running one tablet a day, and then having a couple of weeks off, and then running it again while you're on, just to keep those, you know, those brain functions working. That's the theory anyway, and I'm very much inclined now more to believe it because of the problems that I've had.
Right, so let me recap then. So, I mean, the standard is that people don't know what they're doing. They don't look into what they're taking and what effect it's having on the body. They know it works. They know they get a great effect from it for training and looking good and feeling good, because testosterone also affects your neurology and how you think. And has it been your experience too that when your testosterone drains out of your system, that you notice a big difference in how you view the world and how you feel?
Massively. Obviously, I've been on for 2 years solid, and during that time, I made a mistake. I never come off. I never gave myself a break. I never ran any kind of PCT therapy alongside, which then meant that when I did want to come off, and I ran my PCT, it completely failed. and I tried it again. Still had no recovery. All these were confirmed with blood work.
Right.
Doctors, by the way.
An endocrinologist.
No, well, just a regular GP.
Did you just go to your GP and just told him? Did you?
Yeah. My doctor knows exactly what I do and what I'm on, and this, that, and the other. It's a lot better for me to work with my doctor. Just be open and honest with them. Okay, they're gonna judge you slightly, and they'll say, "Well, no, you shouldn't be doing.
You shouldn't be doing this." But I want muscles.
Mr. Patel.
Yeah, but actually, funnily enough, I did have one GP that actually turned around to me and say, "I can't actually see anything wrong with it," which was amazing, and that was a female doctor. So she was.
She talking about like the fact that you get the media and the news portray this image of steroids are a really nasty, bad drug with these massive side effects that you're going to get straight away, and it's absolute bullshit. The truth is, the side effects you're going to get, like we're talking about now, the main ones we seem to know about are the downregulation of your own testosterone, and that's a very slow and gradual. But that's the trick, because it's like me. I started off. My rule was if I was going to go on for 6 weeks, I would come off for a minimum of 6 weeks, and I stuck to that rule. And I would run my PCT, my HCG, and my Clomid.
Time on equals time off.
Yeah, and I actually started my HCG and Clomid at the end on my last jab, because my last jab was generally something like SUS, which had about 3 to 4 weeks life in it. So it kind of caught up, and I never had any problems. And no one noticed if I was on or off the gear. I didn't look any different. I would just use it as a stepping stone. And it wasn't until the last year where I became reliant upon it. And I noticed a difference coming off, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go back on it again now. You know what I mean? It's always there. It's always available. And that's the danger. And like you, my first 3 months are coming off, and I did HCG and Clomid, and I did them non-stop pretty much, trying to kickstart. After 3 months, I just had no sex drive. I didn't even want to masturbate. I was depressed. I just didn't feel like myself. It took me about a year to get my testosterone back to any levels which were acceptable, naturally.
Yeah, well, this is exactly the issues I've had. Now, can't only, like, since you've been through it yourself, I can't explain to anyone else what the feeling of having no testosterone in your body is like, because I was manically depressed, like I've never been before. And the trouble was, there was nothing wrong in my life. Everything was perfect. A great girlfriend, great job. Financially, I was doing okay. Training was obviously sucking a little bit, and I was losing weight. So I suppose I can get a little bit depressed about that. But other than that, there was no reason for me being as depressed as I was. And it was all down to hormones. Obviously, the same thing was it with no testosterone. It absolutely killed my sex drive. No interest in the slightest. And it just ruined me. And it was a nightmare because I was in a new relationship at the time. Luckily, the girl I'm with is, she's really understanding and cool with it, and she was happy to work through it. But anyone else, it probably would have been a bit of a bit difficult. So the girl I'm with is pretty great for that. But yeah, anyway, I went to the doctors after having a couple of blood tests, after running PCT a few times, not seeing any improvement. GP said, leave it 3 months, come back, and we'll see what your body has naturally done. Because he said your body should naturally recover anyway. It shouldn't be. It will happen. It will just take time.
Okay.
And I thought, well, okay, I've explored all the options that I know of. So I thought, okay, let's just do what the doctor says for a change. 3 months. 3 months of doing nothing. Went back, had blood work, and the blood work results showed that I had recovered marginally. Like the results had jumped up by like 1 point.
Let's say
in 3 months. Shit.
Yeah, let's say my, just for an example, luteinizing hormone levels and follicle stimulating hormone levels, when I first had my blood work done after coming off, after running PCT. They barely registered. They registered at like 0.1 on the scale. We're talking like a scale of 1 to 24. And after going back 3 months later, my levels, FSH levels, for instance, had recovered to 1.5, but the normal range is miles off. And the same with luteinizing hormone levels. They come up maybe to 1.
So in layman's terms, your bollocks just weren't working.
During the first lot of blood work, this, that, and the other, testosterone levels were registering. They were registering low, but they were registering.
How low were they registering then? On a scale?
They were registering around about, I think it was 7, and the scale is, the average for a man is something like between 15 and 24, something like that.
And because you're young then, you should have been at your peak, I guess, really.
Yeah. There's been times before that I've in the past, I've run courses, come off, had my blood work done, and my testosterone levels have recovered to better than the average person, for someone my age, except in this case. Anyway, the fact that testosterone was showing in my body showed that my bollocks were working. So they were being, they were working, they were doing their job because testosterone was being produced. The problem was, not enough of it was being produced because my hypothalamus and my pituitary weren't firing out the hormones necessary to tell my bollocks to
make.
And this is exactly what the blood test could show you, exactly where the signaling was failing.
Yeah, well, it didn't show exactly where the signaling was failing, but you can work out quite easily what is going wrong from the results. There wasn't a test that said, gonadotropin levels are not there, and that sort of thing. I could only get tested for if I went to see an endocrinologist, which I have been referred to anyway.
Is that did you get that on NHS?
Yes.
Cool.
Is that available to everybody then, so anybody can go through that route?
Anyone can. It seems like anyone can go through that route, but I had to really push for it.
Right.
It was one of those things, I'm sure, like, if anyone else ended up in the same position as me, they'd have to speak to their GP. The GP would say, oh, let's give it a long period of let's just see how long your body recovers. So, it could be months and months and months before you can even get referred, before the GP says, yeah, okay, I'll refer you, because he'll leave it down to himself to say, let's let your body recover. And it's only when you see sort of 3-4 months down the line, nothing's happening.
Did you get offered antibiotics? That's the response from a GP for whatever you've got.
I got offered antidepressants.
Oh, there's a surprise.
Yeah, offered antidepressants for the
Good pushback on the drug company there.
Yeah, basically what I did was I just I didn't even lie to him. I said exactly what was going on in my life, the problems that it was causing, and how I was finding life incredibly difficult. I knew myself that I needed to see an endocrinologist, so I pushed for it, and eventually, I got the referral. I've still got to make the appointment. The problem is that after I got the referral, I couldn't cope any longer. I decided to go back on. So
how long did you leave it then? What was your time off of it when you came off?
Total time off was just under 5 months, I think. Okay,
and did you pretty much lose a massive? I guess you lost a massive amount of your muscle mass, did you, at that time as well?
Yeah, I lost 2 stone. I lost 2 stone in weight, which is.
What about body fat? Did you put body fat on?
Yeah. Lost loads of muscle definition. Body fat was just piling on me.
Right.
And I was just completely warping into everything that I hate.
Yeah, shit.
So that's what happened with that. What was we talking about next?
We were getting to your total time off before you decided to go back on, simply because your levels could not get back up on their own.
Yeah, I thought I'd exhausted every option, and I thought, even if I go see the endocrinologist, it's going to take a lot longer to get sorted, and I simply couldn't cope anymore. It's almost like it sounds bad. It's almost like being a drug addict that's going cold turkey and simply can't stay away from it long enough.
Well, do you know what? That's what I see. I see this all the time with people. The young kids, they get on it, and I think most of them start off reasonably sensible, going off and on courses. Then comes the period where it just so happens that they end up staying on longer, and then when they come off that course, then they notice the dip, and then they go, "Oh, I need to go back on it again." And the creeping in of the reliance and the dependency is so gradual and so slow, you don't notice it. I mean, I think you're like me in that you like to consider yourself a researched person, an intellectual person, and you don't want to be taken in with the herd mentality. So therefore, you like to be planned with what you do. And you set out the same way I set out, determined to be intelligent with it, not to fall into that reliance dependency trap. And we've both fallen into it.
Well, I fell into it mainly because I started competing. The problem with competition is that you're either constantly trying to bulk up, or you're constantly trying to cut. The problem
You need to be on it for either.
Yeah, and you know yourself that when you're dieting and you're cutting up for a show, you're talking, 3 months work, that sort of thing, possibly a little bit longer. So, and during the period up to that point, you're probably bulking. So then you're going straight into a cutting course. So then you're on for another 2 or 3 months, cutting down. And then when you finish your show, the first thing you want to do is you want to rebound. You want to grow back up again, stay back on again. Yeah. On there for months. The next thing you know, you've got another show in, 5 months' time, and it's just not worth coming off. So you stay on again, and you just stay on and on and on. And I can see it for people who are competitive bodybuilders. I can see how it is a lot easier to fall into that trap. Yeah. I don't understand it with people who are just regular gym rat users, So that's how I fell into it. And I knew myself that, I knew I needed to come off. I think I thought, because of all my previous experience with coming off, every time I'd recovered fine. I thought, do you know what? I'll be fine this time. Yeah. But I was wrong.
Because that's exactly what happens. It's such a gradual creep up of the downregulation of your own. I don't know what to call it really. Testicular axis. Whole. It's such a gradual thing. And it is that last long course that you do that fucks you up.
That's what fucked me up, and unfortunately, it's meant that I've gone back on. Now I've continued my research and looked into every possible way of getting my recovery back, and I have discovered a couple of new things, but they're only things that I can possibly try and speak. I need to speak to the endocrinologist about it to see if it's something he'd suggest, because what I now want to do is, obviously I'm going to stay on. The reason I went back on again was because that I do eventually intend to compete again. In fact, I intend to compete again next year. Okay. So I thought me taking a full year or two off to recover was pointless because I was going to compete again. However, I don't like the fact that I have to be on it all the time. So I want to know if there is a way that I can come off it again in the future, but not end up with the same issues. Now, at the moment, currently, I'm doing everything that I said people are doing now, which is I'm running HCG at 250 IUs twice a week. Okay. Plus, I'm running 50 milligrams Clomid every single day. So I'm constantly trying to keep everything stimulated and going. Now, though it's all through artificial means, but hopefully it may reduce the problems in the future. But I can only confirm this when I speak to the endocrinologist. I need to speak to an endocrinologist that has had experience with people, steroid users who have suffered from secondary hypogonadism. And I don't know whether I'm going to find that.
I mean, I had a friend of mine who was an endocrinologist, and I call him the mad professor because he's hyper intelligent. He's got Asperger's, but he was constantly trying to find the perfect way to do gear because he was a user himself and he was into training. And over the years, he went from all different theories of you know what you said about the high dosages at the beginning, saturate the system, and then low dosage, and then starting the HCGs and the Clomid and before you come off. And he was always, and in the end, he said to me, he said, Jade, at the end of the day, you're fucking around with a perfectly hyper balanced system, and you're chucking in something which is going to chuck that balance out. So then, if you chuck more things in to compensate for that balancing act, you're just spinning plates.
Yeah.
And in the end, he hasn't taken gear for years and years and years, and he had a big crash and sort of like went through all the shit. And he just said he doesn't believe there is a way where you can boost your levels up to such a high amount and then come off and then get your levels back to normal perfectly. He thinks there's always going to be some complication.
Yeah, I think he probably could be right.
Because there's a feedback. It's a feedback. The testosterone levels go up to a certain level, then bang, you get a feedback system goes back into the hypothalamus. We've got too much down-regulation, and then if you're sending signaling back in to up-regulate, and you've got down-regulating signaling and going in at the same time, do you know what I mean? It's a crazy one. Because I've watched a few interviews with Kevin Levrone and Flex Wheeler. I don't know if you've seen some of their videos on YouTube.
I've seen Kevin's. Obviously, Kevin's now a complete
drug-free,
natural bodybuilder. Gone down that route, and is that's the route he's now chosen to take, and he's doing very well. In it and promoting, I suppose, a healthier, non-steroid way of training and showing that you can grow.
I mean, do you know what I think? I think when taking steroids does give you an advantage. It does help you build more muscle, and if you lose that muscle, you've got muscle memory. And looking at Kevin Levrone when he went through that transformation, within I think it was about 12 weeks, might have been a little bit longer. Obviously, he didn't get back to the same size.
No.
But the size he got to for someone that wasn't taking steroids was very, 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 very impressive. And there's not a guy in the street which wouldn't accuse him of being on steroids. So it's not that it's not like people, if they do come off and stop competing and they do come off the gear, they're still going to be big guys. They're just not going to be up to maximum size, but they're still going to be bigger than the average guy that's never done gear.
Absolutely.
But it's a case. In the meantime, it's a case of getting it all back to normal. Now, I've had to go through loads of different kind of experimentations, and it does force you to do your own research. And I went down the herb route, and to begin with, looking into research into what herbs can do and whether they actually have any usage, it was quite. It's kind of contradictory information. One study says this, another study says that. Because the thing is, with looking at information from studies, is they don't take into account who they're doing the studies on. Like they could be doing the studies on a healthy bunch of teenagers about increasing testosterone levels with a certain herb. Well, like tribulus is very good for increasing luteinizing hormone, but it doesn't work in people that have already got that hormone at maximum levels. So some studies say it's useless, and then they do studies on older men. Oh, look, we've got proper results. So also, because as you know, the whole system has many different parts: the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the gonads, and then you've got the feedback mechanism. So I kind of looked at what nourishes the hypothalamus? What affects that? What affects the pituitary? Can you nourish that? What increases the signaling between that and the gonads? What affects that? What about the raw ingredients used by your body to produce testosterone in the first place, i.e. cholesterol?
Yeah, the precursors to the production of all those hormones as well.
Exactly, like DHEA levels, because when you go depressed, DHEA levels can be dropped too. Did you suffer from fatigue when you came off as well as depression?
Yes.
Yeah, but literally felt burnt out.
All I wanted to do, I don't know whether it was the depression or the hormone levels. It was probably a combination of both. All I wanted to do all day long, every day, was sleep. That's all I wanted to do. I couldn't. I don't know whether it's the depression was making me feel like I couldn't face the world, but I was tired all the time as well. All I wanted to do was sleep. I had no recovery. I just had no recovery ability in me at all.
Yeah, and aching for days from your training, and you're weaker, and it's horrible. It's like a fucking nightmare, isn't it? It's like bodybuilder's nightmare.
You know, I quite like the fact that I was aching for days, because it still made me feel like I knew I'd worked. But all that was in the back of my mind was that everything that I'm doing down the gym is pointless, and I'm going backwards because I have no hormones to tell my body to recover and rebuild muscle. So all I'm doing down the gym is breaking it down, and then my body's never going to recover it because my body hasn't got the right signals to say, yes, build more muscle.
What would be your advice then to if you actually had somebody that was thinking about starting steroids and was serious about training, and they had their eyes set on competing, and you could see that they had potential to possibly go down that route? What would and they were going to go on it, because you can't change someone's mind once they've decided. What would your advice be?
My advice would be for anyone that does it, you know, you have to. It's all very well taking advice from other people, but you have to sit down and you have to research everything yourself. You have to know in your own mind exactly what you're doing and the potential risks and problems that you may cause. And whoever it is can listen to mine and your own experiences and take in the fact that we've done long cycles and it's left us with problems. You know, over time, you know, years or two or whatever, things can recover and can get back to normal, but that recovery period is horrible.
It is.
It is the worst. It's the worst place I've ever been in my life, and I never want to be back there again. I suppose the safest thing to say would be, you know, run cycles, but don't run incredibly long ones. I wouldn't say run a cycle beyond 12 weeks.
I mean, that's 3 months. That's still a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is still a long time.
And the length in your system as well. A lot of decent tests stay in your system for at least 3 or 4 weeks after are quite active.
What I would say is certain bits of gear would, if you want to play it safer, then you stick to short acting, esters, things like. I mean, you can get away with an anthate, but things like, let's say, Deca, for instance, nandrolone decanate, it can still be registered in your system for up to 18 months, so it's still having an effect. From that, let's say you do one shot, 1 mil, that will still be detectable in your system for over a year.
Wow.
You know, it will still have an effect on your body. Deca is like it's the classic, classic stack, testosterone and Deca.
Yeah.
Use it all the time. Deca is a great anabolic, and it builds muscle and it does it very well. The problem is it is so long lasting. It has a very long effect on your body. And if I was to run a safer course, for instance, and I wanted to be really safe about things, I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably stick to the safest hormone that you can probably run is just pure testosterone by itself. And let's say you run something like a Nanthate, it probably has a half-life of, as we say, like 3 to 4 weeks. So even then, let's say you stop it, 3 to 4 weeks earlier than when you intend to. As what you would normally carry on running a course.
So stop it at week 8, which would still give you a 12-week course in effect.
Yeah, stop it at week 8, and then run your PCT. Run a strong PCT afterwards. And
would you recommend people do a course of HCG, which is generally 3 injections, and they say roughly it's about every 4 to 5 days you should do an injection. Would you recommend doing 2 lots of HCG or 1, or what would you say as regards that? I mean, or does it depend on where you are and how you feel?
All right, the basic PCT protocol that I used that has worked for me before I was on for such a long period of time was during the first 2 weeks of coming off, I would run between 1,500 and 2,500 IUs of HCG every other day for 2 weeks. So basically seven shots.
Right.
Now, that might be, to be honest, even I agree myself, that might be slight overkill. It's not necessary. You can get away with using HCG every 3 to 4 days, and that was probably the better way of doing it. Also, during that 2 week window, you should be running 100 milligrams of Clomid every day, okay, and also 20 milligrams of tamoxifen. After those 2 weeks, you stop the HCG. If you carry on the HCG, you'll desensitize your bollocks, and you'll just put yourself back to square one, and you won't recover.
Right.
So it's very crucial that you don't do it any longer than 2 weeks, and you don't do it too much. Too much HCG will oversensitize, will desensitize, your bollocks, and it will not respond to luteinizing hormone when your brain starts pumping it out. Then after those 2 weeks, drop to 50 milligrams Clomid for, let's say, for up to 30 days from when you started. And then the tamoxifen you run for a full 45 days from the day you started as well. So you have it, it's quite a long time, but it just saves. This is what has worked for a lot of people, and it's what has worked for myself whenever I've come off from, reasonable length courses, but not not after 2 years. It won't even touch the surface. After 2 years. So.
Shit. I mean, I'd say the good an interview is Flex Wheeler. He's come out and done a few interviews now, and he's supporting. I mean, obviously, you got to look into what the intentions are with all bodybuilders when it comes to marketing and supplements. But he's basically talking very bluntly and very plainly, like we are now. And he basically says because of the level he was at, he was basically permanently on for years. For his whole competitive life, but he also said that he had access to the highest quality, and he was taking the highest dosage what he could possibly get away with before having noticeable side effects. Now, I got no idea what that is because everybody's body is different. Everybody has different levels of receptor sites. Some people can take a bit of gear and blow up. Other people can take shitloads and it doesn't really make much difference, and they end up with spots and puffiness. Do you know what I mean? So he's obviously genetically gifted to receive a lot of testosterone. So God knows what his courses were. But I'll have to send you the link to the video because he did exactly the same thing. He was mega depressed. Just didn't feel like doing anything. His marriage nearly broke up, and he's talking very plainly and very bluntly about it. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's a part of the sport that people should be aware of.
Well, funnily enough, I was speaking to someone else who's quite well known in the bodybuilding world, who is also going through the same experience as me. He's very friendly with a lot of the pro bodybuilders within the UK, and he has said from speaking to one of the best UK bodybuilders that have ever been produced, and I won't even say his name, but most people know who it is.
Yeah.
It took him 4 years to fully recover.
Fuck no. And I bet that was using everything he could.
Yeah, probably. It took him about 4 years to get his testosterone levels back to anything like normal.
Well, I got a feeling I know who you're talking about.
That was, yeah.
Good bodybuilder, pretty well known name, probably the best known in the world from England.
Former Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
This is what I've heard. I've got no reason not to believe him, and after my experience, I can quite very well believe it's true. The kind of recovery that I had, within 3 or 4 months, at that kind of rate, it probably would have taken me 4 years to fully recover, and I can quite actually believe it. But I don't know how someone like that would cope. for that amount of time, 4 years. That's 4 years of your life wasted being depressed. I couldn't do it. Honestly, couldn't do it myself.
I must admit, where I am now, I mean, it's been 5 years, and I take a range of different herbs. At any one time, I take about 3 to 4, sometimes 5 or 6 different herbs, and they're all natural plant extracts. And the good thing about herbs is they kind of work with your body, as opposed to giving you anything that your body doesn't already have. So they kind of nourish your body, as opposed to, like, for instance, ginseng nourishes your adrenal glands, and it gives you energy. Maca nourishes your hypothalamus. And all of it. So, and I would say any one of these herbs on their own, if you've been on gear and you've come off, you'll probably notice a bit of a difference. But when you start stacking them, which is funny, really, because you're kind of doing what you do with gear. Well, I'm going to use that testosterone because it's incomplete and it's more androgenic, combine it with more anabolic, stack it with this. So that's what I've done with herbs. I've gone, well, this herb nourishes that, this herb does this herb does it. And I thought, well, if they all do those different parts affecting the whole system, and I've managed to get an amazing effect from them, and they're cheap. It's cheaper than being on gear. It's no more expensive, put it that way. At the worst, it's the same price as being on gear. And like, I went to train down the gym yesterday, and I had 2 lads come up to me saying, what steroids are you taking at the moment? I said, look, I haven't taken steroids for 5 years. And they're like, really? I said, yeah, I just take herbs. And they look at you and they think you're nuts. Do you know what I mean? Do you want me to believe that you look like that and you only take herbs? And I must admit, because I think when you've been on gear, you've got an advantage in that you know what it feels like to have high testosterone levels. And it is a wonderful feeling to have high testosterone levels. You're optimistic. Any challenges that come your way, you go, yeah, I can deal with this. Do you know what I mean? It gives you a wonderful attitude for life. And because I looked into studies to do with testosterone, and a study that impressed me was a study on entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs, on average, have a 50% higher testosterone level than the average male counterpart. And they put it down to attitude, because an entrepreneur has a risk-taking attitude. They're extremely optimistic, they're competitive, and they're go-getters. Well, you're just described somebody that's taking gear.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger's mentality in pumping iron and a lot of his early careers while he was a bodybuilder, and you're thinking, well, yeah, that was typical Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it was also typical testosterone.
I think you'll find that if you probably do the research as well into this, probably the men that you see that do well in life, who we regard as the alpha males, they probably all have very, very high good levels of testosterone.
I would agree with that. I would agree. That's from my experience, definitely.
Yeah. And I think well, I don't know what to think. Testosterone plays a massive part in the way you are, who you are, this sort of thing. The whole roid rage issue with it. I'm still not
thing.
Yeah, I'm still not a believer in it particularly. Don't get me wrong. I think I'd probably get a little bit. I might be a little bit snappier sometimes when I'm on it, but it doesn't. Generally, I'm a pretty calm.
I think dieting
person. I think.
What do you think? I think dieting makes you more aggressive than taking gear.
Yes. I've never. This is what I try to explain to some people, because I can be on gear, bulking in the off season, and I can be happy as Larry. And then people, when I'm dieting for a show, and people see me getting angry, the first thing they do is point at me and say, "Roid rage, it's the gear." I said, "Well, hang on a minute. I was on the gear sort of a few months ago, and I was happy as Larry. The only thing that's changed in my life is I'm dieting to hell at the minute. It's the diet that
the diet does fuck you up.
It doesn't have to be, anyone who tries to go through the kind of diet that us as bodybuilders do will know that it makes you just as cranky whether you're on gear or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely.
So I think there's something's being linked, right? I think people think that most roid heads are cranky, but only because of they are when they're dieting.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I ever go back?
I definitely
do you know
think
what?
if you're an aggressive person in that 5 years, I did a
chances
small
are you're
course.
going to be a bigger aggressive
Somebody
person.
literally gave me some
Yeah,
a little
but
bit of
if you're not an aggressive person, then the steroids ain't going to make you an
They
aggressive
literally
person.
gave me it.
Freebies.
Cool. Yeah, freebies. And I thought, oh yeah, I haven't done gear for 2 years now. My testosterone levels are back to normal. I'll just do it for a few weeks. And I literally did about 2 or 3 weeks worth. And in that time, I forgot how effective it can be.
Yeah.
You know, I actually didn't eat that well during those 2 or 3 weeks, but I stripped body fat. I volumized, and my condition transformed. And at the end of those 3 weeks, I looked completely different. But at the same time, I didn't feel right. I just didn't feel myself. Do you know what I mean? But I think because my own testosterone levels were high anyway, I didn't feel any better. I just felt different. And I could feel that there was some foreign hormone in my body. I think Dianabol can do that, to be honest. I think that's a bit of a strange one. And I thought to myself, no, Jade, I'm not going to be a competitive bodybuilder again in the steroid world. I can't be a competitive bodybuilder in the natural world either because I've taken steroids. All I can do is say, well, I've been on both sides of the fence and I train naturally now and I get brilliant results. And really, I thought I'm not going to take gear again because I want to prove to people that you can maintain what you've built on gear. You can even improve. My goal this year, at the moment, I'm lifting pretty much the same weights I was when I was on at my height taking gear, and my condition is not the same, but it's not far off. If I diet for literally 3 or 4 weeks, then I look like I'm on gear.
Yeah.
I get a lot of compliments. I call them compliments. Whether people mean them as insults, I don't know. Saying that I'm on gear when I'm not. And I kind of feel it's my mission to prove that you can still make gains. Because that's what I want to do this year. I want to bulk up this winter, and I actually want to beat my heaviest lifts when I was on the gear, but I want to do it naturally to prove the point. I want to improve naturally because I think that's the biggest head fuck. If you come off gear and you do it properly and you're not competing anymore, then you want to be muscular, you still want to train, and you might still want to make a few gains.
Well, a certain friend of ours was able to do that. He was off for a long period of time, and actually he ended up a couple of times being far stronger when he was off. And then when he went on, obviously he was even better. But during the off period, he built up his strength and was stronger than he was, when he was on.
I mean, my training has completely changed. Not completely changed. The basics and the fundamentals are there. But the main thing that's changed in my training that you do notice straight away is recovery. On gear, I could train 5 days a week, maximum intensity. Naturally, even if I'm really healthy, 3 times a week, high intensity, maximum. Any more than that, and I overtrain. And the thing is, when you overtrain on gear, you just might feel a bit sniffly and a bit tired for a few days. When you overtrain naturally, you fucking lose your testosterone.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a lot more severe. So I think that the difference naturally is you still have to train at high intensities, you still have to use the same training principles, but it's your timing. You have to be a lot more in tune with your body. You get your timing right, then it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, this is what things I've got. I don't sit on either side of the fence. I don't go, oh well, I'm pro natural or I'm pro gear use. So I've been on both sides of the fence, and they both have their disadvantages and advantages. And I've got respect for anybody that goes either direction. But I do believe in talking openly. And if someone asks me my advice on steroids, I tell them bluntly. I say, look, you got to know what you're doing, and eventually, if you stay on them, you are going to downregulate.
Yeah, as you say yourself, people can ask you about steroids, and most of the time I get asked by people that are too young to be using them, and I will advise them against it, and I'll say, don't do it. Don't even consider it until you're older than 21. But
really, when you're a teenager, the hormones are reducing anyway. I mean, at the age of 15 to 19, you're basically full of gear anyway.
I was going to say, the gains that you can make when you are that young, the testosterone levels are through the roof anyway. There's no need to use it. But like you said yourself, if someone is dead set in their mind that they're going to use it, all you can do and all I can do is say, well, if you are going to use it, I'll advise you in the best and safest way of doing it, because I can't stop you. But ideally, you probably shouldn't do it until you're a bit older.
Cool. Right. Well, I've really enjoyed talking frankly with you. Talk to Frank.
Talk to Jada.
Talk to Dr. Jada.
His number will be up on screen.
Yeah, no, mate, it's been really interesting. It kind of makes me feel better in a way that there's other people that have been through the same thing that I went through, because at the time I couldn't talk to anybody.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Well, I think it's been really cool, man, talking to you. Really interesting. Good to speak to you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
If you have found this interview interesting and informative, please feel free to go to my website, jadacastellari.com, to gain more information on how I train and how I train my clients.
I did long cycles that were sort of 16 weeks, that sort of thing.
Right.
Came off. Then I started learning about how the pros do their, get their results, because you try and think, well, how on earth do they get the results and keep it without coming off? And then I learned about blasting and cruising, which do you know about this?
No.
All right. Blasting and cruising, from what I've learned from a few of the professional bodybuilders, is basically you do, let's say, a heavy course for about 10 to 12 weeks, high dosages of whatever you want to take, and then you cruise on a very low amount of testosterone. So let's say 1 mil of test every 10 days.
Really low. That's really low. So what when you say high to begin with, I mean, what would that be?
Due to the sensitive nature of the information contained in this following interview, the interviewee has asked that his voice be disguised so that he remains anonymous.
I'll explain the situation, what's happened, and what I've done over the years, and how things have changed.
Yeah.
Going back about 2.5 years, and all the years before then, I first started using when I was about 18, I think.
Okay. How old are you now?
26.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so I got into it then, and I'd always done short courses, maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then come off. Was always off for months and months and months on end.
So what was your theory to be off a lot more than on?
Back then, obviously, it was still new to me, and I was a little bit more nervous and apprehensive about doing things, too serious. Like the dosages I was using were tiny, and that sort of thing. So I just kept it and tried to be safe with it. And although I'd done a little bit of research when I first started, my knowledge still wasn't up together. My knowledge has only really come together over the last 5-6 years, maybe. Anyway, so things started progressing. I started doing longer cycles, but I always came off, always ran a PCT, cleared myself down. And then I did quite a long course for probably about 18 weeks, I guess, going into my first competition in 2007. Then came off, I was off again. And then also I competed again in 2009. And again, I did longer. High for me was around 750 milligrams, so 3 mil.
Yeah.
I never really pushed it beyond that.
No. And what was your takes? Ethanate, sustanon?
Usually it was sussed.
Yeah.
Usually it was sussed, and I would be running the basics, kind of like if I'm bulking, it would be things like Deca is in there.
Yeah.
And then as I started, if I was cutting up for show, then I'd be switching to things like Trenbolone and Stanozolol and those sort of things. Anyway, so the theory is you cruise for 6 to 8 weeks on, let's say, 1 mil of testinanthate, slow releasing test. And the idea being is that 1 mil will still give you, over that time, slightly higher levels of testosterone than you would produce naturally. But it basically means that you never crash. You never crash from coming off, having 0 test levels, and then trying to get them up again. And the theory is that when you run a very, very small amount of tests for this sort of period of time, it gives a lot of your receptor sites time to upregulate again. All right. So you never have to come off. You stay on. You never crash. And then you can go back on, blast again, and your receptor sites are responsive.
And what about taking stuff to get your own production going? They don't bother with that, or?
Well, yeah, things have changed over the years. Originally, people didn't. Now people have run like a PCT during the cruising period.
When you say PCT, is that the same as HCG? I'm not familiar with that.
PCT stands for post-cycle therapy.
Okay, fine.
Which is HCG, clomid. And yeah. So PCT is the pretty standard word.
Okay. I've been out of the scene, man.